right, so today we have the legendary eLDee. How are you?
I'm doing good.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, we're gonna get into a lot of good questions that I'm sure a lot of us will enjoy to hear from you.
Okay.
All right. So we know you as eLDee, obviously. But tell us where you're from in Nigeria.
So my parents, my dad is from Lagos State, so he's from Saliko, and my mom is actually from Djibouti.
Okay.
But I was born in Zaria.
Oh wow.
My earlier years were in Kaduna. Then I moved to Lagos for university, and then I've been in the U.S. pretty much since.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's and what was it like moving from like place to place?
Well, I think of myself as a nomad because even in Kaduna, like we moved. Well, I'd say earlier on we didn't move that often, but we ended up moving quite often, right?
Okay.
And same thing with me moving to Lagos and living at home and then moving to the campus, and then while I was on campus moving from place to place.
Sure.
And then coming to the US, I landed in New York, went to Columbus, Ohio, then moved to Atlanta. Like, so moving around for me is just something that I've, I guess, always done, even within Georgia.
Wow.
This is my current home is probably the home that I've lived in the longest. And I've only been in it for 2.5 years.
Oh wow! Is there a reason as to maybe you consider yourself a nomad?
I mean, I guess it's just something that I've gotten used to. Like starting over, starting afresh is something that I guess just over time has become familiar to me. So I'm not really afraid of it. And especially when more recently getting into real estate, with my wife, and then seeing that as an opportunity to acquire a bunch of properties, I was just like, you know what? A house is just like a car. We move into one, we do it up, move into another one.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So the concept of like relocating and starting over is not one that's foreign to me at all.
Sure. So like when you were growing up, how was it like in Nigeria moving around? Because a lot of us know people who also moved around, and I know some people who stayed in the same house, same town, all their life.
It was interesting because my dad was an engineer. He worked, across the country at the time. He was one of the lead engineers for Nigerian telecoms.
Oh wow.
Well, for ITT, who was building the telecoms infrastructure for Nigeria at the time. So my dad went to every single country. I'm sorry, every single state in Nigeria. And he ended up traveling a lot. He was back and forth Europe, back and forth the US, back and forth all over the place. So in the summertime, sometimes he would take me along with him.
Wow.
So by the time I was, I'd say 15, I'd been to every state in Nigeria.
Wow.
Yeah. So the concept of like going to different places, it is just something that I guess because of that experience was easy for me. And then, moving houses, moving with the family, moving to a completely new environment. And you might not really understand it unless you lived in the north in Nigeria, but it's very, very different in the north as it is in Lagos, right?
Yeah, I've heard.
Very different.
I've heard.
So it's a totally different experience. In fact, I feel like my US experience, at least my Georgia experience, it's closer to my experience in the north in Nigeria. It was very suburban, very chill, laid back, So yeah.
So what's different about, for the people who don't know, and I haven't been to the north in Nigeria yet. I've only been in the south. So what about the people who live in the north compared to the people who live in Georgia? What kind of similarities do they share?
It's just really slow. It's really laid back. It's very, before it became hostile, it was very, we had a lot of community in a sense, right? And it felt like there were more hours in the day, because it wasn't as eventful, as a place like Lagos. Lagos is very fast paced. You have to shine your eye, like they say, otherwise, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think Lagos, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, Enugu, Kano are a little bit similar with that, like in the city.
Right.
But in Kaduna, I felt more like Georgia, which is like super laid back, it's really quiet. You can almost hear your thoughts, which made it easy for even people like me to be creative. And I maybe it's a conspiracy, but I feel like it's also part of the reason why a lot of the artists, music talent from Nigeria, especially the younger ones, so what I would call contemporary urban, Nigerian music,
Sure.
Afrobeats, as they call it now, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the earlier guys came from the north. And that's because it felt like we had a lot more time to do creative stuff. As opposed to, most of the people who lived, south, where there's too much hustle and bustle for you to actually be able to sit down and actually create. So the laid back, calm, serene atmosphere that was, Kaduna, Jos, early Abuja, and so on, I think definitely added to that. So it's different in that regard. If I were to compare it, it's like comparing living in Manhattan to living in, where are we now? Wilbur, Georgia. Wow. Like, it's completely different.
Okay. For more DXR media content, follow us on our socials. More content's on the way.